Hello, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, based on where you're located. My name is John Bertoli. I'm the head of marketing and partner services at Samsung SDSA, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, How Digital Out-of-Home Analytics and Programmatic Buys Are Driving Business Outcomes. This is the first of many webinars we have planned for 2019, where we plan to shed some light on critical business issues for companies competing in today's highly competitive, ever-changing landscape. We are joined today by our moderator, Diane Carlson, VP of Digital Transformation, Romulus Stoyan, Director of DOOH Marketing Solutions, and Bruno Guerrero, Chief Product Officer at Hivestack. A few housekeeping notes. The audience will be muted during the entirety of the webinar. We will be hosting a Q&A session at the conclusion of the webinar, so we encourage everyone to submit questions throughout the course of the webinar. And if you have any technical issues, feel free to reach out and we will attempt to address them as quickly as possible. With that said, let's kick off the webinar, starting with Diane Carlson.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our discussion today. I apologize in advance. I am working on getting rid of a cold, so my voice is a bit crackly. So I do pardon, please pardon any, if my voice fails a little bit. But I'm very excited to be here today and joined by my colleagues, Romulus and Bruno, who have really deep expertise and knowledge of this industry. So today we're going to delve into the factors that will make DOOH an important lever for brands and marketers to pull as they try and look for their buyers out in the marketplace, and how programmatic, DOOH in particular, is really poised to change the industry. So before I delve into the panel, let me just start with some quick facts from the market. So according to Magna Global, DOOH net advertising sales will increase 16%. The overall out-of-home marketplace is a $7.8 billion marketplace in the U.S., according to OAAA. If you look at Nielsen, 46% of adults have used a search engine to look up information after seeing or hearing a billboard, an out-of-home billboard. And out-of-home marketing boasts an ROI for every dollar spent in out-of-home, you can get almost $6 in sales. So those are all really impressive stats, and it shows the impact that out-of-home plays, how important it is in the media mix, and now with digital capabilities, how it stands to be a real game changer. So my first question I'm going to pose to you, Romulus. Please tell us how you see these digital capabilities adding value to the industry.
Thank you, Diane, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Romulus Stoyan with Samsung SDS. I believe that the digital component of the out-of-home advertising is not a baby anymore. I think it's becoming a toddler, and it's growing. So we're talking about the market segment amounting about $2.5 billion in the U.S. out of the 7.8. And thank you, Diane, for saying that. I think the value of digital out-of-home in our space is that it's more content relevant, it's vibrant, it's dynamic, it's reactive, it's interactive. We are talking about a game change where the industry is becoming more targeted and more data-driven. Definitely, I want to say that, the industry is facing a wave of disruptions in the next 10 years based on projections from Magna. And we are talking about an attitude of consumers, which is a reflection of how they perceive the media. Like, it's more specific about how people will engage with retailers and brands, how much time they spend outside of their homes. Like 7 a.m., 7 p.m., 80% of Americans, they own a mobile device with a GPS activation. So those are positive outcomes for the DOOH segment, which is expected to grow by 24% by 2021. The DOOH segment that we see today in most of the North America is like indoor. It's very heavy in indoor, airports, metros, shopping malls, place-based, and also what's getting traction right now is smart cities with street furniture. In terms of content, I think we're talking about one of the most important advantages of digital out-of-home is that it's dynamic and it reacts to geotemporal conditions. it can be adapted, it can be changed, it can reshape the face of a branding campaign in real time. So I believe, we're talking about a momentum right now when the consumer intelligence and activation and mobile activation will be amazing attributes for out-of-home campaigns.
So, Romulus, I know this next slide you have a bit of knowledge about. Can you talk about Link New York City and how that's really changing a city landscape with digital?
Yes, Diane. I want to say something that's, PG Solomon mentioned. I like the quote that. So they mentioned about, we are talking about the second wave of disruption that's happening right now. Because the first disruption was the arrival of digital media. But the second is the digitization of all media. So I think, talking about the US market, I think Link NYC, I see it in my eyes, the best example of a great execution of DOOH. It's a data-driven DOOH. It's a smart media execution that is a fantastic initiative that goes around the globe. I think we're keeping a great momentum, and the US market is slightly adapting to that. And it's a result of urbanization, and people are migrating into the big cities. So I think by 2050, Diane, 2/3 of the population will live in the big cities. So I think it's the right growth where the growth is. So in terms of Link NYC, I think it's a trifold. It's a good for the city, it's good for community, because you are talking about a screen that has a wayfinding, you have Wi-Fi capability, you have charging phones capability, you have Skype. So I think it's good for the city, it's good for the community. Also, it's good for the brands, because we're talking about consumers actively on the go that can be geo-targeted through this smart technology in terms of beacons or mobile device IDs in the streets of New York.
Yeah, it's very, very, very cool technology. So we know that online really has set the bar for audience targeting, and DOOH, in order for it to be successful in the field, has to be accountable and measurable. And there's a great quote from Arthur C. Nielsen: "The price of light is less than the cost of darkness." This appeals to us in particular because we think data is so important, and nobody wants to be data dark. It's all about having that data to make smart decisions. So, Romulus, another one for you, but what are some of the ways that we can measure performance in DOOH?
Right. Well, thank you, Diane. So I just want to mention that I'm honored to be one of the pioneers that I was involved in the first, digital audience measurement with Geopath, DAB at the time, back in 2008 in Chicago. So I think we are talking about one of the oldest mediums, which is out-of-home advertising. For many, many years, 100 years plus from the old times of out-of-home, there was one term, DEC, daily effective circulation. I think the industry, the changes in technology really improved the metrics of out-of-home. So 2008 was when the out-of-home advertising industry migrated from DEC to impressions, to impression-based measurement. At the time, it was called eyes on impression, and slightly that became out-of-home impressions. So we are on par right now with radio, with television, with online, in terms of measuring the traffics, measuring impressions. So we can sell based on TRPs and GRPs. I think, Diane, we're going to 2.0 level of measurements when we have external inputs, such as video intelligence, video analytics, mobile device IDs, beacons. I think this is creating a more layer of transparency, accuracy, and real reliability in the media measurements, which is exactly what brands are trying to hear, exactly what agencies are trying to get. When we met with Mark Pritchard's team in Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, that was the very first question from him. And we said, video analytics combined with mobile device IDs are creating the most accurate, the most transparent way of measuring consumer engagement. So I think this is the future.
Very powerful. So if you look at the headlines today, there's a little bit of fake news, I think, because people are hailing the death of retail. Is retail dying? There's an apocalypse going on. And I was encouraged. I attended NRF in January and listened to one of the analysts, Sucharita Kodali, from Forrester, talk about the industry. And the retail industry has actually seen quite a bit of growth over the last 6 years. I think the issue here is that retail isn't so much dying, it's just evolving, and buying patterns are changing. So brands really need to adapt. So my next question is really, it's to Bruno. Bruno, can you tell us how you see brands using programmatic in digital out-of-home to drive growth for their businesses, for their brands?
Yes, thank you, Diane. So according to eMarketer, retail, 90% of purchases still happen in store. So even though there's a lot of budget being spent online for online purchasing, most of it is still done in store. So there's a lot of still investment being done by brick and mortar to drive people to go in their stores. But now, with all the measurements capabilities that we're able to do related to digital out-of-home and programmatic digital out-of-home, with everybody now having a mobile device and having different types of big data sets of mobile device IDs, where they've been, then we can kind of understand behaviors, understand people where they've been, and starting building profiles based on locations of devices of people where they've previously been. I have different case studies that maybe will describe how those brands are leveraging measurements and programmatic digital out-of-home. So Nordstrom Rack is being a technology company. We've worked on several types of brands. Nordstrom Rack is one of them. Nordstrom Rack are opening multiple different stores in the United States. And they've worked a lot with Hivestack in terms of every time they're opening a stores. And the goal, the KPIs that Nordstrom Rack wanted to do, they want to drive in-store visitation to their new store by drawing traffic from consumers that frequently visit competitive stores. So after the opening, what they want, let's drive people coming to my stores. And with new technologies, with data, with measurement that we're not able to do with digital out-of-home, we've discussed where we could do a campaign where we geofence all the different competitive stores, such as TJ Maxx, Marshall, and we looked at devices that have been frequently in those competitive stores before the campaign starts, before the store opens. And then we build our profile of people that are going to those stores. Then there's an out-of-home campaigns running on digital out-of-home screens, billboard, outdoor digital out-of-home screens, or digital face-based screens. And when we observe a high concentration of the people that are in front of the screens, we deliver an ad. So we're targeting a specific audience the same way as digital buying is being done using cookie or using device ID segmentation profile. We can do that based on past history of location of different people. So that when we're exposing a different device to an ad, then we can understand afterwards how these people, what they've been after, if they went to the store, to the Nordstrom Rack store after being exposed. And we compared that to a control group of unexposed devices in the same market that have walked into the Nordstrom Rack, because there's always going to be natural foot traffic. And the difference between the exposed group compared to the control group is the lift. So we can measure conversion. And with that specific campaign with Nordstrom Rack, we've measured a lift of 39% of people exposed to a digital out-of-home ad that have walked into the stores after being exposed. We've done other campaigns also with Keurig in Canada. Keurig, they build coffee machine, and they sell also little K-cup pods to put into the coffee machine. And they are selling their product in big retailers. And they wanted to expose ads to people that are often going to those retailers to tell them to buy their K-cup pods. So what we did, we geofences those retail places, and we activated digital out-of-home screens when we were observing high concentration of people going to those retail stores, so that we can expose an ad to them and then measure conversion from those people that have been there And then we saw a lift of 19% of people exposed to the ad compared to the control group. And to a certain extent, what we're also being able to do, not only measure conversion from digital out-of-home to offline walk-in to offline foot traffic, but we've been also going to more online conversion, the same way as digital buying is being done. There's a lot of budget being spent on app download. I'm going to spend a budget, and what I want to drive is people to download my app and start using it. So with digital out-of-home that taps into data, we can understand people exposed to the ad by tapping into IDs that are the same IDs that are being used online. So the IDFA, the Apple device IDs, or the Google advertising ID. And then we can understand from the app stores of Google and Apple which IDs have downloaded the app. So if we compare people exposed that have downloaded an app compared to unexposed people that have downloaded an app, we can understand lift. So we did a campaign with Just Eat, which is an online food order and delivery service. And then Just Eat wanted to drive people to download the app instead of going to the restaurant. And we saw a lift of 23%, more download from people exposed to a digital out-of-home ad compared to a not exposed. So, you know, by adding measurement to digital out-of-home, this is all the different things that brands and even brick and mortar stores can leverage and invest more budget. They can measure conversion, they can understand foot traffic, and they can understand better the success of the campaign.
Those are great examples, Bruno. Thank you so much for sharing. So let's turn around a little bit here and talk about programmatic in depth a bit more. Because when you look at, so for example, eMarketer says that 85% of all digital ad buys will be programmatic in 2019. But there's a bit of a disconnect with out-of-home. Only 39% of media buyers are aware that they can buy out-of-home programmatically. So, you know, it's just not lining up. There seems to be a lack of awareness. So, Bruno, can you talk to us a little bit about what needs to happen in the industry for digital out-of-home to become more mainstream? I know this is your area of expertise. What needs to happen? And if you could tackle it more, you know, first from an assessment and measurement standpoint, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Being a technology platform and being on the technology side of the industry, you know, there are several things that I feel could be done. We're already advanced compared to where we were last year or the year before, but there's still a lot of improvement that can be done and a lot of challenges that we need to go through. So impression, audience/impression is key for programmatic buying in any different types of scenario. Before I talk about digital out-of-home more specifically, let me step back a bit, just kind of online web display buying. You know, traditionally, many years ago, the way even website was selling their advertising was, I'm going to sell to a brand and I'm going to put it on my website for everybody to see it, independently of the location. It's just going to be on the front page top, and they're selling kind of weekly ads that is on their website, and there's going to be approximately that amount of traffic. And that has changed a lot. So similar to how out-of-home is being bought, you know, in a traditional fashion, like I'm selecting the ad on that screen and it's running for the entire week. And that has moved to impression buying, which is key for programmatic buying. So instead of buying the website and be there for the entire week, their buyers are buying the audience. Buyers are buying impressions, buy impressions. So when somebody goes on the website, at that time, in real time, an ad request is being made and there's an auction. And different buyers using different buying demand-side platform tools are auctioning and want to buy that specific single impression, that person that is on the screen, and they use data. And they use data to understand who that person is. Or using cookies, using device IDs, there's many technologies that exist, so that every time a person is navigating to a website, the auction is being done in real time, and that person buy a single impression to be delivered for that person. And it's all being bought CPM-wise, cost per million. So that's the currency, impression and CPM that is being used for digital buys. If you want to start bringing digital dollars to out-of-home, what I feel impression is key for all this. So that's why starting buying impression-based and audience-based, understanding the audience in front of the screen and delivering to that audience instead of picking location, entering a budget, entering a CPM or buying against a CPM and entering, delivering against impression is key for programmatic out-of-home to be there in a measurement fashion. Now, one of the challenges is how do we understand how many people is in front of the screen? So there's a lot of work being done there. Now that you have access to mobile data, and Romulus talked about it a little bit earlier. So companies like Geopath, Nielsen, or even in the UK, Rote, or Australia, Move, and Canada, Com, they're all thinking, how can we get more data so that we can convert a ad being played on a board and understand how many people is on front of the screens at that time, so that we can report back the number of impressions to buyers, so buyers can buy programmatically using the same type of currency that they're buying digital using CPM and impression. So impression, we need to kind of continue improving how we can measure the number of people in front of the screens, and technology needs to start supporting different types of way, which I will discuss a little bit further, but regarding impression multiplier and all these things. But so impression is key. The other thing that I think might also even help more is being able to measure business outcome. The same way as I described a little bit previously with my case studies, digital buyers are buying and based on conversion, based on attribution, how many people have saw my ad and maybe clicked on it. I've walked into my store, I've downloaded my app, went onto my website and purchased something. So if we're able to measure business outcome, measure effectiveness of a campaign, at that point, if somebody's investing in out-of-home and able to understand the conversion, the business outcome, compared to investing into online, then if for for a certain amount of money for budget, they're seeing more conversion, more business outcome from a digital out-of-home campaign, then there's a high probability that they would like to invest more money into digital out-of-home compared to other channels. And I think by being able to measure more accurately business outcome, this will drive a lot more budget to digital out-of-home.
That makes sense. And Bruno, how do you see supply and demand playing a role?
Yes, supply and demand for sure, they can help a lot in bringing industry to grow and taking more dollars from digital buyers which are buying programmatic on other channels. I think one of the main things that we need to do is to make the inventory of supply inventory, to make it kind of visible, to present it to buyers that are currently buying programmatic other channels, to make it in a similar fashion, available in a similar fashion than other digital inventory, to make it easy for them to buy, so that buying Facebook is as easy as buying digital out of home. If we're able to encompass and to be able to make it easy for them, more budget is going to be spent. So programmatic digital out of home, there was a lot of buy that started coming from channel DSP. Channel DSP means DSP that are optimized and can only buy digital out of home. And one of the reasons for that is because DSP could be built on top of an infrastructure that already exists in a one-to-many types of fashion, where there can be many people in front of the screen at the time you're delivering an ad, where there's this offline kind of mechanism where an out-of-home screen sometimes loses connection, but there absolutely need to have an ad being displayed. You don't want to see a black screen on an out-of-home screen. So there are all these kind of limitations that out-of-home lives with. A channel DSP, we're starting, could kind of be built and be made possible with the different type of challenges that exist there. So there are a few channel DSP that's starting bumping up in different markets, and there's start to have some buys, programmatic buying happening. Now what we're seeing is the omni-channel DSP are starting to get in. The big ones like MediaMath, Adform, Adobe, The Trade Desk, Google. And when those guys will going to come in, this is where there's going to be a lot of budget coming in from these guys, because there's a lot of trading desk digital buyers that like to use a single DSP and to have all their different buys going to that single DSP. So we absolutely, as a supply side and technology, to make it easy for DSP to integrate, because those omni-channel DSP, they are looking at out of home, and they are looking at how much money they can make by supporting digital out of home. And there's going to be some work to be done on their side. And we're competing as an industry against other types of channels, OTT, TV, programmatic TV, mobile, native. So they have all these places where they can invest money. And this is where, if we make it as seamless as possible for DSP to integrate, for them, the business case is a little bit less because the spend's going to be less. So right now, I think we've been very successful in supporting standard that they support, IAB, OpenRTB, VAS, HTML, transaction based on option. So by making this very easy for them, then they'll come and integrate more easily. The other thing, audience targeting is key. DSP, demand side platform, when buying programmatically, they're buying audience, they're buying people, they're using DMP connected to the DSP, they're having first-party data. So all these capabilities need to be brought in out of home so that buyers can not pick location the same way as out of home has been bought traditionally, but can buy an audience, set a budget, set a CPM, and let the system deliver and optimize your campaign to get the target audience that you have. So right now we're kind of, with mobile data, we're able to better identify the audience, where they are at what moment, so that DSP can buy. So it's DSP with supply side, we're able to allow buyers using those platforms to buy a specific audience on digital off screen. That would help a lot also, and we'll make it simple and more aligned with what they're doing for digital buying. One thing also that right now will have to be a challenge, and we'll have to see how we can better simplify the process for buyers from a supply side perspective, is the creative process. Every creative right now for out of home needs to be approved by media owners, publishers before being put on their board, which is very understandable. And I don't think that I think it's going to stay like this for a certain period. So if we can simplify a little bit the process for buyers, because buyers right now, when they're buying digital inventory, a video on YouTube, they're setting up their campaign and the campaign can run within 30 minutes. We need to make it seamless, as easy as possible, so that they upload a creative, they set up a campaign, and then easily the creative can be approved and the campaign can start running. So we'll have to spend a little bit of effort there to simplify a little bit the process on the creative side.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Exciting days on the horizon and lots more efficiency in the marketplace. So now I'd like to turn our attention to overall market adoption. If you look at it, from a macro view, a global view, when you tend to live like right outside of a big metro like New York City, you think that digital is pretty much the norm, but in fact, that's not really the case. The industry is still in the early stages of transforming. So let's talk about who's leading the way and why you think that is. So I'm going to turn this question to, let's see, Bruno, would you like to answer that?
Sure, thank you, Diane. We've worked with multiple supply side and demand side partner in several countries. I think there's a lot of different markets that are investing a lot in digital out of home today. Right now, we're seeing a lot of buys coming in the U.S. Biggest media owners are now onboarding programmatic digital out of home, the Clear Channel, the JCDecaux, Lamar in the U.S., Upfront. All the big guys are starting to invest more and more spend into digital programmatic out of home. So in the U.S., it's happening. There's a lot of buys being done. In Canada also, the biggest media owners in Canada and the trading desk are spending a lot of money, the Cadreon, the Amnet, with the biggest media owners that are in Canada. Also in Germany has been very, very successful since 2-3 years and bringing a lot of programmatic buys coming from digital buyers. Strohr is doing an amazing job in there. We're seeing a lot of momentum in the UK. Australia is starting to grow a lot. What I think is that kind of the early adopter market, I would say maybe Germany, that's been doing for a while, US, Canada, even though it was growing very fast, exponentially, I would say, you needed to start somewhere. The markets that are now joining and starting to be more active, they will catch up very fast because now technology has been built. There's a lot of more players in terms of the platform that are now being made available and starting to support digital out of home. So markets like Australia, where we're seeing certain growth there, are catching very rapidly to other markets that have been there for 50 years. So we're seeing pretty much growth in multiple different countries.
Romulus, let me pose that same question to you. How do you see this rolling out? What's the adoption like globally?
I think, Diane, we're fast followers. In DOH, we're fast followers, right? We like to see what's going on in an online and mobile space, and then what problems they're facing, and how can we adapt? How can we create value in digital out of home? So I think we're doing great at the global level, Diane. We see from Magna Global, it's about 80% of out of home placements will become digital by 2022. 80% is an amazing number. So I think it's really achievable if we can pave the way, and we are building networks and we're creating the supply side for the demand side to connect brands with consumers. So in terms of advancements in global out of home, I think the revenues in out of home are surpassing the print media, no doubt about that. We're overtaking the newspapers already. And I think, we're talking about a great wave of disruptions in the next 10 years. I think this is going to be a reflection of the consumer attitude about media. Speaking about millennials, it's a very, very hard to target. So I think the digital out of home, being in your face and targeting a captive audience on the go, has the utmost advantage. So definitely we see the growth. We see about 12.6% annual growth from 2016. The trend is positive. I think, according to Allied Market Research, the DOH market globally will reach about $8 billion by 2022. So, which is very, very positive.
Thank you, Romulus. Well, it's really exciting to see all the growth in the industry. I personally started my career as a media buyer, so it's wonderful to see the progression and the ability to really be measurable and accountable, especially in this particular space. So we're at this new era of outdoor media. Before we end our discussion today, I just wanted to pose one last question from me to you, to the panelists. What are your predictions for 2019? Do you see any specific trends you'd like to highlight for us? I know from my point of view, you're starting to see more and more penetration of digital in airports and bus shelters and train stations and, the shopping malls, helping you navigate a space. And you're going to start, I think, seeing a lot more creativity and interactivity with the content that's on that screen and the passerbyers, the viewers, the watchers that are engaging with the kiosks and displays. But I'm curious, from your point of view, what do you see? What's your prediction? Bruno, let's start with you.
Good question. I think in 2018, what I have observed is a significant growth in companies that are playing a big role, tech companies in mobile buying and display and video as a programmatic perspective. By 2018, to the end of 2018, I think most, or if not all, companies now started to play a certain role in digital out of home. Companies like all data companies, the PlaceIQ, the Cubic, the Place, the DSP, as I was describing before, the demand side platform, MediaMath, Adform, the Trade Desk, the supply side platform, big guys like Rubicon connect to digital out of home. AppNexus is talking about it. So all these different tech platforms that have made what programmatic digital buying is today are now into digital out of home. So we're starting 2019 like that. So I feel that by the end of 2019, if all these different tech platforms are investing more and more, it's going to grow even more than what it was in 2019. Because having all the industry like that putting effort and seeing how we can bring more budget into digital out of home, it's going to grow pretty significant by 2019. So I look forward to see how, by everybody together working on improving digital out of home programmatic buying, how it's going to look like at the end of 2019.
And Romulus, how about you? Any predictions?
Definitely. Yes. I like predictions. We're still at the beginning of the year, so we should be able to project something. I personally believe that the industry is growing, but it's not growing enough. And I think what is the driving engine of this growth is what? Technology, development, innovation, 4G LTE. I think the industry must be adopting, and we have to grow where the growth is. I think we're talking about 2019 as a year when companies will be adopting programmatic more. You know, from a $100 million industry in the US, I think we're gonna go into a 150 million space. It's gonna be a robust organic growth. I personally believe that the quality of video content is gonna be in high demand. 5G LTEs will engage, will drive high quality video on demand. Also, I believe that brands will develop a more creative content, more targeted to DOOH. The content is going to be used in more contextual relevance. It's going to be more integrated with mobile devices, so we can extend the reach from an advertising campaign from a billboard to a mobile device. Since we're talking about 99% of the smartphone users, which are interacting with their phones in any given week. In terms of content, I think rule-based content managers will be the new trend. I think companies will be using additional data sources, will be managing disparate data sources into a cloud that can create meaningful outcomes and synergies between beacons, Wi-Fi, mobile device IDs, camera intelligence. And I think this conglomerate of data sources can be put into a context where brands are getting the benefits, are getting the transparency. We see the uplift, we see the conversion rates in purchase and engagement. And also, I want to say that advancement in machine learning, I think is going to be very important. I think we're going to see that in content automation. Since machine learning learns from consumer interaction, I think artificial intelligence will play a very, very pivotal role in out-of-home advertising, so we can respond in real time to consumer habits based on what we can capture from the inputs.
Romulus, Bruno, thank you so much. This ends the formal panel discussion, but now I'd like to turn it over to John, who's going to kick off our Q&A. So we've been getting questions from our attendees. And John, off to you.
Thanks, Diane. An excellent job, Romulus and Bruno. We've had a few questions come through during the course of the webinar, and audience members continue to submit your questions, and we'll try to address them in a timely manner. First question, is DOOH a viable option outside of cities to reach people outside of large metro areas?
This is Bruno. Let me answer that. Thank you, John. I feel yes, possibly yes, more and more. And the reason for that is traditionally digital out of home or out of home has been bought by picking a location where there could be a lot of traffic passing in front, which is mainly happening, at downtown biggest, locations where there's a lot of traffic. But now using data, understanding movement pattern, there's a possibility to target an audience and not just picking the locations, but delivering an ad to the audience that's in front of the screens. The same way as web buying is being done. You don't need to pick what website you want to be in. As much as the audience that is surfing on the web page is the person you want to deliver that, then this is the person you're buying. So by doing that, I think that's going to open up kind of some locations in a market that are more difficult to buy, to sell the traditional way. And I'm going to give you an example, like a coffee shop being downtown, kind of close to different business office. Most of the people that are going there are probably not living close to the coffee shop. So traditionally, an advertiser would pick 2-3 different kind of screens that could be close to the coffee shop so that somebody walking close to it will see the ad and then might just walk into the coffee shop. Now, but with audience, with letting the buyers to set a budget and select a specific market and let the platform optimize the delivery against the audience by understanding that where those coffee shoppers are coming from, then probably the data will say that in the morning before going to work, the audience might be at 20, 30 kilometers from the coffee place. During the weekend or at night, that, those people will not stay at work. So that might be better to deliver an ad before that person goes to work or during the weekend than continuously delivering close to the coffee shop. So I think location data is allowing this. It's allowing to deliver ads against an audience, and the audience is not always where you think it could be. And so that might open up different types of inventory that are further away where there's a lot of traffic, but still there's traffic that is very important and for the buyer, and then the buyer will start paying only for specific selected audience who wants to reach, even though it's far away from the big streets.
Great, thanks, Bruno. The next question that came through is, what verticals have you seen are more receptive to digital out-of-home ad buying and selling?
Well, I can take that, John. Thank you very much. Well, traditionally speaking, out-of-home connects brands with consumers, right? So the most important segments of the market, which are spending the most money, according to Advertising Age, for example, is CPGs. I think CPG is going to continue to spend more money, more smart, more intelligent. They're looking at conversion rates. They're looking at activations. They are looking very carefully at what's the return of investment. So I see the CPG, I see financial, I see automotive, I see telecoms continuing to advance. Definitely I see electronics. I see untraditional segments like social media companies continue to spend money in digital out of home, and pretty much everyone that can create value in the media mix by having out of home as a main support for search engine optimization or for creating brand awareness and top of mind awareness, where you can buy a product. So definitely I see a growth, and I personally believe that we're going to bet on CPGs as much as we can.
Great. Thanks, Romulus. Do you see an opportunity for greater transparency in the industry because of programmatic buying?
Let me answer that. Thank you, John. I see programmatic helping a lot with transparency in digital out of home. I'm all in favor of transparency. And just programmatic on its own, for other digital channels, there's a lot of effort being spent in the industry from a supply side perspective and from a buy side perspective for more transparency. Because, a lot of fraud that's been happening, and different other reasons. So by getting more budget being spent programmatically on digital out of home, we can leverage all the different technology, all the different specs, standard that has been built for programmatic execution on other channels. There've been a lot of problems where buyers, they're having issues with the fees because with programmatic buying on other channels, when an ad is being made available to be bought programmatically, there's a supply side platform fee, there's an exchange possibly fee, there is a data fee, there's a DSP fee, and this is really not transparent for buyers. So right now, there's a lot of effort just in general for programmatic to understand how can we be more transparent with fees. Maybe we can understand what they're doing, and then for digital out of home to start, we can follow certain kind of pattern or certain implementation that they're doing and reproduce them with out of home. Another thing, there's right now, because there was a lot of inventory being made available to buyer from fraud websites that they were saying they were different types of websites, and buyers were delivering ads on fraud websites. So There's kind of been work there. There's a kind of little file that I call it the IB, call it ads.txt, which is kind of certifying the media owners, the publishers are certifying what platform can represent their inventory. So that if, when the buyer is buying, if it's not done through one of the platforms that they have kind of accepted and certified, it means fraud. So, all these little things are done here and there to get more transparency. I think if with programmatic digital out of home, we can understand what's being done and leverage and try to copy some of what's being done on the other side is going to help a lot for transparency in out of home.
Okay, great response, Bruno. Last question that we're going to take for this webinar. In terms of managing risk on digital out of home, what insight can you provide around best practices?
I will take that, John. I'll take that question. So definitely media publishers, they rely on advertising revenue, right? So this is the return of investment from building networks. So I think in 2019 and beyond, digital networks, they have to keep an eye on remote management, on inventory management. Network operating centers are playing an important role. We want to be able to have an industry which is fully transparent and running at 100%, but it's difficult because you rely on many things. You rely on the type of screens, you rely on internet, you rely on acts of God, many things. So I think what I will recommend is increase the monitoring systems, invest more in technology to be able to have a proof of play, because at the end of the day, proof of play is paying the bill, is paying the campaign. So having a more accurate way of keeping an eye on your networks and having a quick response, like a next day break fix, having those kind of plans and programs in place will definitely help out-of-home advertising and DOOH in general becoming more responsive. One of the biggest challenges that the industry had during the years was not being able to fix the problems in time. So the industry was facing lots of issues like paying back credits up to 20%. So I think 2019 and beyond is when we have to really keep an eye and make this remote monitoring and next day break fix more like a process.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and we hope you found this webinar educational. We will be addressing any questions that we couldn't get to on the webinar, and we will be sharing the on-demand version of the webinar later this afternoon. In addition, our next webinar will be in the late March timeframe, and that'll be around wayfinding and digital out-of-home advertising, specifically for convention centers, malls, and other types of venues. So we hope you can join us for that webinar as well, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.